In late April 2011, in New Orleans, Louisiana, the atmosphere was heating up with the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. Thousands of people were flocking to the fairgrounds racecourse, where music echoed and the aroma of Cajun food filled the air. Amy and Ben, whose names have been changed, two music enthusiasts, had come here to experience one of America's largest festivals. New Orleans was already famous for its ghost stories and haunting history. But in the festival atmosphere, those things seemed overshadowed by the joy and excitement. Amy and Ben blended into the crowd, enjoying performances on different stages. Jazz, blues, gospel music, and the unique sounds of New Orleans echoed, captivating everyone as they walked through a less crowded area within the fairgrounds, where there were old oak trees with Spanish moss hanging down. Amy suddenly felt a cold draft blow through her. The feeling was strange, not like normal wind. Amy turned to Ben. "Are you cold? I suddenly feel a chill." Ben shook his head. "No, I'm fine. Maybe you're catching a cold." Amy tried to ignore the cold feeling, but it stayed with her. She looked around the area. Under the old oak trees, the faint light shone down, creating bizarre long shadows. Just then, Amy suddenly saw something move among the shadows. It was a blurry figure, like a person standing there, silently watching them. Amy stopped abruptly. "Ben, do you see something over there?" Ben looked in the direction Amy pointed, but saw nothing. "Where? I don't see anything." Amy squinted, looking closer. The blurry figure was still there, lurking in the darkness, although she couldn't see clearly. Amy sensed a gloom and sadness emanating from it. She felt as if it was someone standing there, lonely and lost amidst the vibrant festival. As Amy looked closer, the figure slowly raised an arm, as if waving to her. Amy felt a strange urge to go closer, but another part of her felt scared. Ben pulled Amy's arm. "Amy, let's go. Don't stand here anymore." Amy reluctantly turned around and walked with Ben, but as they walked out of sight, she still felt as if someone was watching her from under the old oak trees. That night, when Amy and Ben returned to the hotel, Amy couldn't forget the blurry figure she had seen at the fairgrounds. She knew it wasn't an illusion. She felt a strange unease. Who was that ghost in the festival? What did he want? New Orleans, the city of ghosts and spirits, seemed to be revealing some dark secret to Amy. In the following days at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, Amy still felt a strange unease. She constantly looked around, searching for the figure of the ghostly clown she had seen. Although she didn't see him again, Amy still sensed his presence somewhere in the crowd. She also began to hear very faint whispers echoing in the air, especially when she was in less crowded areas within the fairgrounds. The whispers were very weak and difficult to hear, like the wind whistling through a narrow crack. But Amy was sure it was a human voice. The voice sounded sad and full of regret, as if trying to tell her something. Amy tried to listen more carefully, but the whispers were too faint and often blended with the music and the conversations of the crowd. Ben noticed Amy's unease. "Are you still thinking about that figure?" Ben asked. "Maybe you're just tired." Amy shook her head. "No, it's not that. Ben, I feel like something is wrong. I hear whispers too." Ben looked at Amy with a worried expression. "Whispers? Are you sure, Amy?" Amy nodded. "Absolutely. I've heard them many times now. Like someone is trying to talk to me." Ben still seemed skeptical, but he didn't want to worry Amy further. They continued to enjoy the festival, but Amy was no longer completely immersed in the music and the cheerful atmosphere. A part of her mind was always focused on the ghostly clown and the strange whispers. One afternoon, as Amy was standing near a small stage, enjoying a jazz performance, she suddenly felt a cold draft envelop her. The feeling was much stronger than before. Amy shivered and turned her head. She was horrified to see the ghostly clown standing right behind her. Just a few steps away, the clown's face was still sad and lifeless, but his eyes were staring directly at Amy with a terrifying intensity. In his hand, the clown was no longer holding the egg. Instead, he slowly extended a gaunt hand, his long and cold finger pointing at Amy. And then, the whisper echoed, this time very clear, as if coming from the clown's mouth itself. "Follow me." Amy screamed in terror. She stumbled backward, wanting to run away, but around her was a crowd of music lovers. They were dancing and singing. No one noticed the ghostly clown standing there. No one heard the terrifying whisper. Amy felt utter terror engulf her. She knew that the ghostly clown was inviting her to follow him, and she didn't want to know where he would take her. After the terrifying encounter with the ghostly clown, Amy lived in utter fear. The whisper, "Follow me," constantly haunted her mind. She knew that clown was not an illusion, he was real. Amy told Ben everything. Ben was skeptical at first, but when he saw the genuine panic in Amy's eyes, he began to believe her. They researched ghost stories and the dark history of New Orleans together, especially stories related to the fairgrounds area and the time of the jazz festival. They discovered that the fairgrounds racecourse was built on the site of an old plantation. In the 19th century, this plantation was the site of many tragedies and crimes, including brutal slavery and mysterious murders. It was rumored that the spirits of those who had died on the plantation still lingered in this area. In particular, they found a terrifying story about a man named Jean-Pierre, who worked on the plantation. Jean-Pierre was considered eccentric and had strange behaviors. It was said that he frequently performed evil rituals in a small house deep in the woods near the plantation. One day, Jean-Pierre disappeared mysteriously. His house was abandoned, and it was rumored that his spirit still haunted that area. Notably, some people said that Jean-Pierre had a strange fondness for masks and bizarre clothes, and he sometimes dressed up as a terrifying clown. Amy shivered reading the story about Jean-Pierre. She believed that the ghostly clown she had seen was the spirit of Jean-Pierre. And the whisper, "Follow me," perhaps Jean-Pierre was trying to lead her to his old house in the woods. Amy and Ben felt a deep unease. The vibrant and cheerful jazz festival suddenly became more terrifying than ever. They knew that behind the music and laughter, a darkness was lurking. Amy felt a strange connection with Jean-Pierre. She believed that his spirit wasn't simply evil, but perhaps he was trying to tell her something, or wanted her to do something for him. Amy decided to try to find Jean-Pierre's old house in the woods. Although Ben was worried and tried to dissuade her, Amy believed this was the only way to solve the mystery and perhaps help Jean-Pierre's spirit find rest. Ben reluctantly agreed to go with Amy. He didn't want to let her go alone. They decided they would search for the house during the day. When there was sunlight, one morning, Amy and Ben went together to the edge of the wooded area near the fairgrounds, where Amy had first seen the ghostly clown. Even during the day, the woods were dark and damp under the thick canopy. The air carried the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. They went deep into the woods, trying to find traces of a trail or any sign of an old house. Ben carried a small knife for self-defense, and Amy held the egg, an item she had accidentally found near where the clown first appeared. feeling a connection to it. Amy felt a strange unease as she walked through the woods. She felt as if someone was watching her from the darkness. The sound of birds chirping and insects buzzing in the woods suddenly fell strangely silent. They walked for a while, then suddenly saw something ahead. It was a small trail, almost completely hidden by weeds and bushes. This trail seemed to lead deeper into the woods. Amy felt her heart beat faster. Perhaps this was the path to Jean-Pierre's old house. They followed the trail. The deeper they went into the woods, the colder and gloomier the air became. The old oak trees with Spanish moss hanging down looked even more terrifying. They walked for a while longer, then suddenly saw something lurking among the trees. It was an old structure, built of rotten wood. Amy and Ben approached and were horrified to realize it was a small, dilapidated house. The roof had partially collapsed, and the walls were rotten and covered in moss. This was Jean-Pierre's old house. The house looked very terrifying and desolate. The windows were broken, and the door was askew. A gloomy and deathly atmosphere enveloped the house. Amy felt a bone-chilling cold as she stood before the house. She felt as if some evil energy was radiating from it. She looked at the egg in her hand. The egg was glowing faintly and emitting a strange energy. Amy felt as if the egg was trying to tell her something about this house. Ben whispered, "Amy, I'm scared. I think we should go back." Amy was also scared, but curiosity and the desire to solve the mystery urged her on. She wanted to know what had happened in this house, and why Jean-Pierre's spirit was trapped here. Amy said, "No, Ben, we're already here. We have to go inside and see." Ben hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly agreed. He didn't want to leave Amy alone. They slowly stepped inside the dilapidated house. The air inside was colder and damper than outside. The smell of mildew and a strange, indescribable odor was strong. It was pitch black inside, with only faint light entering through cracks in the roof and walls. Old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs, was scattered around. The house had an eerie atmosphere, as if the tragedies that had occurred here still lingered in the air. Amy and Ben walked quietly in the house, trying not to make any noise. Their every step was as light as possible. They went through the living room, the kitchen, and other rooms. Everything was dilapidated and abandoned. It seemed no one had been here for many years. However, Amy felt a strange presence in the house. She felt as if someone was here, watching them from the darkness. She held the egg tightly in her hand. The egg was glowing more intensely, and Emily's whisper echoed again, this time clearer. "Danger." Amy and Ben shivered hearing Emily's warning from the egg. They knew something dangerous was lurking in Jean-Pierre's old house. They continued to explore the house carefully. The egg in Amy's hand glowed more brightly, guiding them. As they reached the back of the house, they saw an old wooden trapdoor on the floor. This door seemed to lead down to the basement. Amy felt a strange unease looking at that door. She felt as if some evil energy was radiating from beneath it. Emily's whisper echoed from the egg again, "Down there." Amy knew they had to go down to the basement. Perhaps the secret about Jean-Pierre and what had happened here lay down there. Ben was worried. "I'm not sure. Amy, the basement looks too scary." Amy was also scared, but she believed in Emily. She knew Emily was trying to guide them. Amy slowly opened the wooden door. A damp earth staircase led down to a dark and cold space. The smell of mildew and a strong, peculiar odor was much more intense from below. Amy and Ben carefully stepped down into the basement. The light from the egg in Amy's hand was their only source of light. The basement was small and dirty. The earth walls were damp, with roots sticking out. The air was heavy and suffocating. As they went deeper into the basement, they saw a few old objects scattered around, empty glass jars, torn pieces of cloth, and strange symbols drawn on the earth walls. Amy felt a chill. These symbols looked like magical symbols, related to the evil rituals people rumored Jean-Pierre had performed. Then, as they reached the end of the basement, they saw something horrifying. In the middle of the basement, there was an old stone pedestal. On the pedestal, a strange object was placed. It was an old human skull, yellowed with age, and on top of the skull, an old mask was placed. The mask looked like the face of a sad and terrifying clown, like the face of the ghostly clown Amy had seen in the park. Amy and Ben screamed in horror. They backed away, their hearts pounding in their chests. Emily's whisper echoed from the egg again, this time full of pain and fear. "He is the captor." Amy understood. That skull with the clown mask was Jean-Pierre's remains, and his spirit was still trapped here, in this basement, and perhaps, his spirit had become something evil, something dangerous. Amy and Ben stood there, horrified, staring at the skull with the clown mask on the stone pedestal. Emily's whisper from the egg said he was the captor. Amy suddenly understood. Jean-Pierre wasn't just trapped here. He was the one who had caused the tragedy for Emily's family. It was rumored that Jean-Pierre was eccentric and performed evil rituals. Perhaps he had murdered Emily's family as part of some ritual, or to steal Emily's soul, and his spirit had been bound here, in this basement, along with Emily's spirit. He was the captor, but also the captive of his own crimes. Amy looked at the egg in her hand, then looked up at Jean-Pierre's skull. She felt a strange connection between these two objects. Just then, a sudden cold draft blew through the basement. The candles, which Mary, the psychic, had given Amy for protection in Amy's bag, began to flicker violently. Then, from the skull on the stone pedestal, a faint laugh echoed, a laugh that sounded cold and eerie. It was the laugh of the ghostly clown Amy had seen in the park. Amy knew that Jean-Pierre's spirit was nearby. The laughter grew louder, and the room became colder. The symbols on the earth walls glowed faintly. Then, the blurry figure of the ghostly clown appeared behind the stone pedestal. He stood there, staring intently at Amy and Ben, the smile on his face distorted and terrifying. Emily's whisper from the egg became panicked. "Run!" Amy and Ben backed away, wanting to escape from this terrifying basement. However, the ghostly clown moved to block the exit. He stood there, looking at them with cruel eyes. His laughter echoed in the basement, sounding like the pits of hell. Amy knew they were in serious danger. Jean-Pierre's spirit had become evil and dangerous. She held the egg tightly in her hand. She knew the egg was the key. It contained Emily's spirit, and perhaps it was the only thing that could fight against Jean-Pierre. Amy looked at the ghostly clown and said, her voice trembling, What did you do to Emily? Did you trap her spirit?" The clown didn't say anything. He just looked at Amy with cruel eyes. Amy continued, "What do you want from us? Do you want this egg?" The clown slowly nodded, his eyes full of greed as he looked at the egg. Amy understood. Jean-Pierre wanted to take the egg back. Take back Emily's soul, perhaps to maintain his evil power. And perhaps, the plea for release that Emily had spoken wasn't a plea to cross over, but a plea to be released from Jean-Pierre's captivity. Jean-Pierre, in the form of the ghostly clown, slowly advanced towards Amy and Ben. his eyes full of greed as he looked at the egg in Amy's hand. His laughter echoed in the basement, sounding like hell itself. Amy knew they couldn't escape. She had to face him. She held the egg tightly in her hand, feeling Emily's energy. Amy said to Ben, "Ben, take these candles. Maybe they can help us." Ben took the candles that Mary had given Amy. He trembled as he tried to light them. The ghostly clown lunged towards Amy. Amy screamed and backed away. Just then, the candles in Ben's hand suddenly burst into flames, emitting a blinding white light. The light shone directly on the clown, causing him to shriek in horrifying pain. The clown recoiled, shielding his eyes from the searing light. The power of that light seemed to be weakening him. Amy suddenly remembered what Mary had said about energy and spirits. She believed that the light from these candles could harm an evil spirit. Amy said to the clown, "You will not trap Emily anymore. You will not harm anyone anymore." She held the egg in her hand, focusing her mind on it, thinking about Emily. She wanted to help Emily be completely freed from Jean-Pierre's captivity. A faint light emanated from the egg, merging with the light from the candles. This light shone on the clown, causing him even more pain. The clown roared in anger, trying to lunge at Amy to take back the egg. Ben tried to use the candles to push the clown back. The light from the candles acted as an invisible barrier, stopping him. The battle between light and darkness took place in the damp and terrifying basement. The clown's screeches, Emily's moans from the egg, and Amy and Ben's gasping breaths mingled together, creating a horrifying sound. Jean-Pierre, in the form of the ghostly clown, grew weaker under the light. His figure became blurrier. The colors on his clothes faded. Amy knew this was their chance. She had to end this. She held the egg tightly in her hand, looked at the ghostly clown, and said, "Jean-Pierre, you will never trap anyone again. You will pay for what you have done." She focused all her energy and will into the egg, thinking about release for Emily and punishment for Jean-Pierre. Amy focused all her strength into the egg, aiming it towards the ghostly clown. The egg glowed brighter than ever, emitting a pure and powerful energy. That energy shot towards Jean-Pierre, colliding with his evil energy. A loud explosion echoed in the basement. Jean-Pierre let out one last horrifying shriek. The ghostly clown figure cringed, disintegrated into black dust, and completely vanished into the darkness. The light from the egg and the candles also gradually faded. The room returned to silence. The cold and gloomy feeling dissipated. Amy and Ben stood there, breathing heavily. They had survived. They had defeated Jean-Pierre. Amy looked at the egg in her hand. The egg was still intact, but the coldness and evil energy from it were completely gone. Instead, the egg emitted a warm and peaceful energy. Amy felt Emily's presence in the egg, but it was no longer pain or fear. Instead, it was peace and serenity. Amy whispered into the egg, "Emily, have you been released? Have you found peace?" After a moment, a gentle breeze blew through the basement, carrying the scent of flowers and a feeling of warmth. Amy knew that Emily had heard her. Amy believed that Emily's spirit had crossed over, along with the spirit of the ghostly clown, who was perhaps also a victim of Jean-Pierre in some way. They had found peace together. Amy and Ben left Jean-Pierre's old house. They brought the egg with them. They reported everything to the police about what they had found in the basement and about their encounter with Jean-Pierre's spirit. Police were initially skeptical about the supernatural details in their story. However, they investigated the old house and found evidence of strange rituals and other clues related to the murder of Emily's family. Although there was no direct physical evidence that Jean-Pierre had murdered Emily's family. Amy and Ben's story, along with what was found in the house, was enough for police to believe that Jean-Pierre was the culprit. The murder of Emily's family, after many years, was solved, although in a way that could not be explained by science. Amy kept the egg. It was a reminder of the horrifying jazz festival, of the secrets hidden beneath the ground of New Orleans, and of the release of two souls. She knew that the spiritual world was real, and sometimes, unfortunate spirits needed our help to find peace. And perhaps, the music from the New Orleans Jazz Festival is not just the music of the living, but also the rhythm of the souls, trying to find peace and release. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the channel to follow our latest videos. We will bring you more terrifying and haunting stories. Thank you for listening.